volunteerism and to serve humanity. He received his Bachelor of Arts and Master's degrees from the North Carolina Central University. He received an advanced training in public history, archival management from North Carolina State University, and he went on to North Carolina Chapel Hill to get his University Manager's Development Program degree. Andre, is all you. As the coordinator of University Archives and instructor at North Carolina Central University.
All right, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Are we doing pretty good? First of all, thank you so much, giving in. That's not my word. Dr. Cummings, thank you so much for the kind opportunity. And so glad to see all of y'all here. You're going to get a chance in a few minutes to see a little bit about the North Carolina Central University experience. But I do have a few introductory remarks. But I just want to say, again, conversation like this is so timely. I think in a time in which some assume that the history, culture, and life of African Americans is not to be celebrated, right? And so whenever you have a chance to sort of step back and look at where you've been, to understand where you're trying to go, I think it's a wonderful thing. And so with that in mind, I want to share with you one of the great pieces that Christopher McDougall, in his great book, Born to Run, he said, every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows it must outrun the fastest lion, or it will be killed. Every morning in Africa, a lion wakes up. It knows it must run faster than the slowest gazelle, or it will stop. It doesn't matter whether you're the lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you better be running. So I'm going to run. Running to share with you under time frames for battle. And again, I say good morning to you all. I thank you all for this great opportunity to participate in this discussion. And I thank you even more for creating space for a conversation like this. I also thank all the other program participants as well as you, the audience, because there are many places in which you could have been. And I see many in the audience whom I know, and I'm so glad to see all of you all in one way or another, okay? But it's also a great opportunity to sort of be here as well. My family has a great connection to Shaw University on two fronts. Well, three. One, my brother, retired Lieutenant Colonel in the Air Force, was class of 1981, graduated from here. I have a wonderful photograph, my mother-in-law outside of the hall where they took their graduation photo, and that brings back great memory. But also I can say, as a member of the Baptist family, we hail from Henderson, North Carolina, belong to a little, well not a little, but a Baptist church called Shallow Baptist Church. It's been around since 1866. And I'm pleased to note from 1880 to the present, every pastor of our little Baptist church has been from Shaw University. Including her pastor, who's a classmate of my brother, by the way. And so that lets you know a little bit. But also, I think Shaw University, back in 1996 and 1997, I was had just received my master's in 95, and I was teaching at North Carolina Central University, trying to decide whether I was going to go to get a doctorate or where. And so this institution also gave me some safe harbor. It gave me an opportunity to teach and kind of practice a little bit. I'm about 25 and 26 years old, teaching in a classroom at university, two universities at the same time. But I think this institution, I taught courses in African American history, North Carolina history, and these are full classes about it. These are not 10, 15, 25, 30 students. But it was a learning experience as well for me, and so I'm thankful for that. But also I have to talk about one who had tremendous impact, right? One on my life, but also on this great institution. His son was the former dean of our school of business at North Carolina Central University, Dr. Fleming. But I have to talk about great Dr. John Fleming. For those of you how many here know who Dr. John Fleming? Reverend Dr. John Fleming. The rest of y'all, all you have listened to. And so I'm reminded of a great Greek proverb that states, a society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. And this conversation very much mirrors that of the life of Reverend Dr. John Fleming, who was a family friend, right? One who dedicated his whole life, almost in the sense of Shaw University in the Baptist Church. And he's somebody that should be known. He's the one who helped. If you go over to the Chief Library, you get a chance to see, and I remember on numerous occasions going over to his office to see and to look in the archives. And you all have a wonderful archive and wonderful history that predates most institutions because of your early years compared to other historical like colleges and universities. That was okay. Okay. All right. And so, without Dr. Fleming, minister, educated church historian, who made my tenure in life here quite pleasing because he always sort of gave me the ropes and sort of showed me how to get around this institution. And I'm thankful for that. And so, for me, I have come to understand, the work that I engage in every day. Just imagine you get paid to get up in the morning and do something you love to do. Now, I would have done it free, but they didn't ask me to. So nevertheless, it's not, I've spent this August will be sort of 36 years at one institution, from a freshman all the way up, freshman to master's. I've been teaching there as well, and that for me has been a great place. But one of the highest and greatest honors was to be able to go in and help coordinate university archives. I started there under Mr. B.T. McMillan, Mr. McMillan, who lived in 99, by the way. He came in every day, up until his 99th birthday, to be there with me in archive. Archive that he had helped found back in the 1980s, right? But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the precursor to the work that he did in terms of chronicling the history of North Carolina State University and our place that came up. But I have to be thankful again to all of those who have sort of helped pave the way for where I am today. And I do that by noting, what we call, when someone like Dr. John Fleming comes along, we have to appreciate his life, right? Not just a preacher, talk here as well, very engaged in the community, preacher of one of the local churches here. But I think these great words, should sort of help come to mind when I think about it. And this is sort of what we call the difference between someone who is committed and someone who's concerned, right? There's a difference between someone who's concerned. Someone who's concerned, as you might know, may ask about the problem. Lord knows they might talk about the problem, yet probably won't do anything about the problem. And their position is usually what we call negotiable. However, when you see someone who's committed, someone who's willing to do something about the problem, you'll find that their position is never negotiable. Because you recognize people like that, like John Fleming, who will give their time, their talent, their treasure, who gave their commitment to such an institution as Shaw University. And how can we forget him? So such was the life of the great John Fleming, who exemplified a belief in a new narrative that had been cast that centered on the African life and bringing African Americans to the mainstream of society. Now let me paint to you a quick window, and then we're going to quickly move into the presentation, and we'll have time reserved for questions, right? But when I was in grad school at North Carolina State, I was asked to sort of take a look at what we call the early motivations of those who were creators and collectors, and those who crafted, and what got them to where they are. What helped them along the way. And so I wrote a piece called Digging It Up. Yeah, I know it's a catchy title. And at the time, there was the development of African collections then at two kind of local libraries, Richard Harrison Library here in Raleigh. You're going to see a picture. His mother used to leave, whose grandsons now like Ace Boone Coon, best friends in the world. And then snapped at Warren Braxton Library. The Warren family, who I know as well. Two African women who came up with this idea to sort of help create works and bodies of material to speak against and to refute some of the negative stereotypical images by creating great libraries that help offer some healthy work. And this in North Carolina State University benefited from both of their works. And so I want to share with you just for a quick minute what we call the early movement. Because many people assume that this question of creating and writing works to sort of create a much more positive image of African life is something that's new. Well, I want to tell you that actually with those who, as far back in Philadelphia, and while institutional slavery was going on in America, there were African American study societies going on with it, right, among the free population in Philadelphia. But I want to center this conversation on today to 1897. It was an important movement in terms of chronicling the past of African American history. When a group of black book collectors organized in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the Afro-American Historical Society, later renamed the American Negro Historical Society. Leading members of this organization were Robert M. Adler, William C. Boulevard, William H. Darcy, and most notably, George Washington Williams, the first African-American historian of record, for those who are unaware. They had been motivated to develop private collections of books and other sources, mainly to dispel many of the myths that really align and malign and create this narrative of the inferiority of African Americans or black people at that time. And so they sought to provide a written record of their past by instilling, following, pride, and establishing an African-American and African perspective on history in America. Consistent with the collective efforts of the American Negro Historical Society were the activities of other African-American organizations that sought to repair race prejudice that arose around race consciousness and crime, and stimulate interest in collection and preservation of historical materials concerning the black experience. Another such organization was the American Negro Academy, formed by a small group of African-American scholars who were eager to collect, preserve, and archive the experiences of early African Americans. Leaders of this group sparked an interest among other, as we call it, black nationalists, who emphasized race pride and solidarity. I hope you understand where I'm going. By the dawn of the early 20th century, the historical societies and the academy had clearly influenced the intellectual and social life of African Americans by reminding them of their daily duty to retrieve the lost pages of history. These organizations in turn were educating and emphasizing the need for records and other evidence to show the accomplishments and achievements of blacks. One institution that was known even more significantly is the effort of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, or the Negro Life and History, begun in 1915 by Dr. Collins Woodson. I hope everybody heard it. They ever seen the picture of Dr. Collins Woodson. You understand the importance of the working life. I've been a member, participated in many of their conferences and presented. But Dr. Collins Woodson, who was the founder of this organization, he was the second African American to receive a PhD degree in history in the United States of America. Now anybody want to tell me who the first one was? From Harvard University, that's a clue. Say it again. You're absolutely correct. Dr. W.B. Du Bois was the first. The great Dr. Collins Woodson was the second. Right? And Dr. Woodson, his interest in history of blacks stemmed from what he found many of the kind of really one would call racist and negative stereotypical works that depicted African American life. Right? And he was among that group of persons, just like the other early groups that I mentioned, who worked to really try to elevate up and retrieve what they call the lost pages of history that many people merely just did not talk about or merely did not know. But that is the great work of him. He taught African Americans to be more active in preserving the knowledge of their past. If not, the valuable records could be lost to the world, and the achievements of blacks would disappear with it. Many of the records were credited in the Association Journal of Negro History. How many have seen or hope to read or saw anything from the Journal of Negro History? It's been renamed since. If you haven't, you're missing a treat. You can go all the way back to almost 100 years ago, and you can read many of these great historical works where African American scholars were excluded from many mainstream journals I just helped the American Historical Review put together a piece on several professors, African professors and scholars who were denied opportunities to publish their works, right? And so now the American Historical Association is working very much to remedy that by going back and focusing on the lives of those same great scholars who back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and 50s, who were what we call that breakthrough generation, who were trying to write and include and bring into the mainstream the idea of what African American history really was all about. And that was important along the way. And so by 1940, Dr. Thomas Wilson announced that more than 5,000 manuscripts had been collected and placed in the Library of Congress. And if you don't understand how important that is, that was an important watershed moment, right? Because it's the idea of writing and bringing African Americans through these materials, through these papers, into mainstream society. It was also the idea of helping to remove that cloak that existed there of those who said, oh, well, that was no issue that African Americans have done, that should be written and publicized in books. And yet, here we go, with manuscripts, documents, books, and materials that motivated and stimulated this next generation of scholars who went out to sort of better document these works. So Dr. Woodson, in announcing his efforts in collecting these historical records, noted that such institutions at that time, Howard, Fisk, and Atlanta University, had already begun to dig into the past of African Americans. So the work done by the early pioneers of African American history occurred in conjunction with numerous events and movements and ideas that spread throughout the entire United States, the Western Caribbean, West Indies, and most certainly in Africa. So do not think that what happened here stayed here. George Washington Williams alone went back to what's called today what was known as the Belt of Congo, and reported out what was occurring there. George Washington Williams was also the one who wrote 2 volumes set on the life of African Americans, was the first pivotal work ever to document the contributions of African Americans, right? And he did so in numerous capacities, right? So in talking about the collection, and the preservation of African materials did not occur in a vacuum. So it's important that we place this idea, this movement among African Americans to better tell their stories. You have to keep in mind some important events that occurred. Talk about the era of Jim Crow era, of legalized segregation in America. That still is a very important part that takes place here. I was among the first students at Duke University, North Carolina Central University, outside of Jackson State, to take the first courses ever taught on the history of Jim Crow in the entire South, right? So Jackson State, Mississippi, and outside of that, Duke University, North Carolina Central University, partnered up for the first time ever, right? When I was in grad school, to start offering courses on Jim Crow. So that opened a window for us to go out and talk to people, to interview people. There's some interviews now at Duke and at NCCU from that movement, which really calls many black collectors and bibliophiles to rescue and retrieve their past by all means necessary. And that's what's important. So the organizational development among black history organizations into African American special collections becomes largely important because of the self-determined efforts of those bibliophiles. And that's a great word to know, by the way. Bibliophiles and collectors. Those who have a love and reverence. I think the term I once heard years ago was, I never heard it a day in my life, coming from a small village in North Carolina. But the term was filio-pietistic. And I said, what in the world does that word mean? I know you're saying what the world does filio-pietistic mean. It's just merely means to have a love and reverence for one's race and one's people. Not that your history is any greater than anyone else, but it is the idea of noting the significance and bringing that history into the mainstream of American society. Now I'm going to quickly move to one other person that you shall see in the next few minutes. And to note that many of these persons were guided again by race pride, right? In other words, they believed in the history and in culture of that people. And they did so by noting these contributions. So if that theme has not come out yet, you're not living today. I'm trying to tell you that the idea of understanding, the idea and the essence of teaching a new generation to have an appreciation for the history and culture in the midst of segregation, in the midst of Jim Crow, in the midst of works that do not describe in a more solid way contributions of African Americans. That's something that we owe to the last generation. But then there's one person that I have to talk about. One person who, if you've ever heard about him, you go back and you read more on him. And that's the great Arthur Schomburg. If you've ever been to New York, how many have been to the Schomburg collection in New York? We got a few. The rest of y'all, we got to work on y'all. We got to get you up to New York, we got to get you up to Harlem, right? And I've been there, and I think it is the Schomburg collection, found by Arthur Schomburg, is important. He was a noted bibliophile and collector who created what is known as the 135th Street branch of the New York Public Library, which was the predecessor of what later became the Schomburg Center. Right? So his belief and the ideas by Schomburg really captured the imagination of many African Americans to be more what we call intentional about the preservation of their history and their past, but also about telling the next generation about their history. So in one of his most noted articles, he called it "The Negro Digs Up His Past." And oh, I wonder what in the world stone that would cause in America. The idea of saying that the Negro digs up his past and is looking and is desiring to know more about him himself had to be pathbreaking, right? But also through this work, he also knew that the American Negro must remake his past in order to make his future. Through it is orthodox to understand the thinking of America as one country where it is unnecessary to have a past. But he says, but what a luxury for the nation as a whole to become a prime social necessity for the Negro. The Negro must restore what slavery took away. And so you do not have to think too long and hard on that, the importance of that and understanding that. And so lastly, in this part, the lasting impact of race pride and race education propelled a new generation of Black archivists to educate the African community about the importance of telling and collecting their own stories and certainly their own history. The message of preserving the past was passed on to numerous organizations and many historical Black colleges and universities, such as ours. The conversations crossed geographical borders and touched many and every facet of African life in the entire United States of America. So the next thing I'm going to show you North Carolina University's look and attempt to tell these stories, and I'm cognizant of the time frame. And I hope you will guide a little bit here. And I begin by a great quote that I live by. Anyone who's ever emailed me, you're going to get this back. So that's at the bottom of my signature line. And it says, until the lion has a historian of his own, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunt. A great Hebrew African proverb, and with the mindset of reminding you that you too have an obligation to help tell your stories. And if you don't, others will tell it. Think about that in the context of why we're here today. How many know about this? Very simple. The idea of knowledge being there, and that forward-looking, backward-looking, ideogram, by the way, with that great gold there representing knowledge, right? And that's what we are talking about. And there we are. Well, Arturo Alphonse Schomburg. And followed, as I noted, he noted pride of the race is the antidote to prejudice. And note that as he establishes, what became the Schomburg collection, he is in essence speaking against this era and time in which African Americans lived, which some might know were not positive times at that time. But African Americans nevertheless had a great world, as Dr. Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham called, when she talked about the Baptist church, I'm borrowing a little bit, she said African Americans had to create a world within a world, right? And they had to, out of necessity for survival. And so I have two other little guiding thoughts. One is that it's important to understand that historical record is never complete. I say that to say that many of the works of early American history included bits and pieces about African American life. But we find that those works help to push an entire generation to follow after them, to go out and create and write works that would be more inclusive and bring about a much more powerful history recorded in terms of African life. But then I like the last one, which is that historians sometimes have to compile evidence themselves, filling in the gaps by venturing to go after the evidence. That's important. That's about the work that we engage in. That's the work I walk in every day. But I walk in the morning, I'm one of those who never like to have a heart attack, so I always do my email quietly. That way I know what to expect. And I always tell the chancellor, I said, well, if you don't fire me, fire me that morning, so I read quietly. and he just liked this. But also, I want to dedicate this talk, and we're going to move on, dedicate this talk to one of our early graduates. She's a librarian. For those of you may have ever heard, is Maggie Bryan. She just died at age 108. She's oldest graduate. Back in February and March, we had a ceremony in her honor. We received her papers. Her family collection and connection goes back to the university almost 100 years. And that says a lot. But she was also a noted genealogist, loved history. I'm going through her room after just imagine about a 10-room house. And you're going through every room, and every room is full of this and full of that. And it is what will keep you going. That's all I'll say. I have to give you a tribute to Miss Bryant here, one who was, again, honored by every organization I think there was in the library field. But also, when we talk about great modern history, how many of you have heard of great modern history? Okay, y'all get better. You got to work the rest of it. For those unaware, I had the privilege for Oxford University Press under Skip Gates. They were doing a book on African American minds. And so he said, well, take a look at some folks from North Carolina you might want to do. And the fact that she lived a few blocks away from the university, two grandsons, good friends of mine, I said, well, I think I found myself. And so I wrote about great modern history, one of the early graduates, by the way, in the field of library science. But also first African librarian, Rob, I don't know if you knew that. And also the founder of Richard B. Harrison Library. How many knew that? All right, we're going to do it. And this is just her, just sitting there and contemplating, but I think about great contributions that she and others committed in time and wasn't popular to say that African Black history was important and worth supporting. And thank goodness, a lot of her collections in different times, and we're thankful for that. And let's talk about how programs like this help us out. The idea of noting what we call the changing narrative of African American history. We know that programs like this help to create what we call and reconstruct new narratives about African American life. And that includes, as I just mentioned, the question of emancipation, Jim Crow, and then post-desegregation. What was that like? And that is what scholars are concerned. That's what they want to know. They talk about just about every form of history that is just about. But that is a great level of curiosity. I get it every day. Great level of curiosity around African American minds and what would they engage in. So much so that we pulled together a group of scholars from North Carolina State, Carolina, and we met at, by the way, stamped at one branch library on neutral ground. And we asked the scholars, well, what do you want? Like, what are you looking for, in material? And don't you know, scholars from at least all schools, and the one set, they all say that they want, and they wanted more of, was African American history. Right? And so we, like others, are aware that we have what we call these hidden collections. Those that have not been brought out yet, but we're working every day to bring forward great collections and works and materials that scholars might need in the future. And that's important. But also we recognize that there are gaps in the historical narrative. And also the record and the scholarship that exists there. And it says, and it's urging unto us to pick up the pace and do a whole lot more. And also by challenging the traditional narratives, I think it helps us to help scholars and researchers to what we call wide historical footprint, by including those that had previously been left out and added those stories in, especially those of African communities, but also including women. And the most important part that if there was a change in my life for the last 25 years, from when I first started, was we oftentimes focus on what we call the black superstar. These were the well-known black folks that everybody knew, the well-known organization that everybody thought of. But that has changed in 25 years, I have to look at that. Because I do spend a lot more time now helping and trying to chronicle the everyday experience of the working class community. Because that is the left out piece of history that is so missing in many of the great works today. Right? That's important to keep in mind. Now, I'm going to be moving a little bit faster. But let me introduce you to the gentleman whose name adorns our first special collection. The great Reverend Dr. Charles Douglas Martin. If you've never, anybody ever heard of Reverend Martin? You should know about him. He's an associate, first of all, of the great Arturo Schomburg, right? And for those unaware, the Martin collection of North Carolina University is named in his honor. What most are unaware about his life is that he was born in British West Indies, attended local universities in the United States of America, founded a local Moravian church, by the way. He was ordained in 1912 as the only African-American minister of the Moravian church in the entire United States of America. You talk about birth, that's birth. But most importantly about his life was, he was an avid book collector and friend of Schomburg. And so connections and relationships, don't tell me they don't matter. Oh, they matter. And so years happened. Upon his death in 1942, the university received a call from his widow, who was desirous at that time of selling his collection. And so she approached the university. They talked to several other persons, including the great Dr. Dorothy Porter Weston. If you have not heard Dr. Dorothy Porter Weston, you got to walk out the door right now. Walk out the door right now. What about our grads? Dr. Janet Sims Woods, who used to work at the National Archives. She authored a great book that I have an autographed copy of, entitled North Porter Weston at Howard University. And I've had the privilege of meeting her, and the most kind and elegant woman you will ever meet in your life. But just like both her husbands, the famous James A. Ward, famous artist, and professor at Howard. But then she married the great Dr. Charles H. Weston, who was a historian, first class, first rate, early PhD from Harvard as well. And you found a great relationship in between the two because they were great also collectors of African materials and books and manuscripts. And so Dr. Porter Weston was consulted because Howard then was one of the premier African collections. And so she said, well, hey, if you want to be a first-rate institution, this is what she said to Dr. Alfonso Elton. She said, well, if you want to be a first-rate institution, then you have to have a collection that anchors that institution in which researchers and scholars can come in. And then comes in. So as I say here, don't say the leadership doesn't matter. Great Dr. Alfonso Elton, second president of the university, accepted that challenge, went out, talked to many persons, including faculty members. He sent them up to look at the collection. Dr. W. Farrison sent Ms. Watson up, Rachel Watson up to take a look at the collection. They reported back, sir, you get this collection. Only problem was that the widow wanted $7,000, right, in 1940. And Dr. L was like, well, we got to work on this. So he called the Carnegie Foundation, and the Carnegie Foundation came forward, gave him the money. They didn't give it $7,000, they gave it $3,000. But nevertheless, we received that collection March 23, 1950. And here's what he said. He said the nucleus for an extended program, in talking about the modern collection, he considers, and this is in Durham Morning Herald, who interestingly was interested to know what we thought about that collection. And so he said the nucleus for an extended program of study and research for cultures, Negroes in Africa, and in the North and South America. And so what that said was that we're not just look at this African life in the United States of America, but looking at other nations and communities that had not been talked about and noting the importance of such. And so the modern collection is housed in what we call the treasury room at the university. And it consists of over 3,000 items, including books, materials, photographs, interestingly noted, 3 African spears and 2 African gowns that he had captured up until his death in 1942. And that entered in a new era for us, the idea of understanding material culture and also bibliographic works and materials that noted the presence of African Americans, not just North America, but the West Indies, Africa, and South America. For those of you who may be aware, Dr. John Franklin, who I hope everybody knows John Franklin. But anyway, he authored Slavery Free, right? And so for those unaware, in 1947, as he prepared to depart to go to Howard University, he stumbled upon this 2-volume set by, as I mentioned earlier, great George Washington, first known African-American historian in the United States of America. By the way, Delilah Beasley, California, she's the first African-American woman. So in case you didn't know that quiz part. And so he was able to find the 2-volume set. He later goes on to write From Slavery Free. That last year we celebrated around campus, and I think some of y'all came, well, I guess. I never came to North Carolina for the 70th anniversary of John Franklin From Slavery Free. Okay, we're going to extend that invitation, sorry. We got to look at but that work was important because it was among the early pioneer works that used actual, real scholarship as well to document that African life existed outside of this slavery. And so if you have that copy, I have every copy of Dr. Franklin's book, by the way, Slavery University. And so what the most important thing I would note here is that Reverend Mark was intentional, right? Y'all understand what I mean by that? He was intentional about what he went out and what he collected. And these works not only spoke to his theological work, right, as a Moravian minister, but again, talking about black culture and West Indian and African heritage and culture. And that had been pathfinder in the sense that these are not subjects that people talk about. And so let's talk a little bit about sort of the other special collections, and then we will almost be there, okay? For us, we see the idea of collecting and preserving, interpreting, and explaining the history of not just North Carolina Central University, but also explaining, we focus primarily on 20th century, 21st century African American history. And we look at the number of things: material culture, the built environment. We spend a lot of time focusing on the built environment, it's important, but also lived memories. The idea of people sharing their stories through interviews, people also gathering and giving us materials to help support some of this work. But we also see ourselves as a great repository for documentary, photographic materials pertaining to NCCU and local community. We have a collection that is anchored by Alexander Rivera, who was one of the most noted photojournalists in the United States of America. And if you've never heard of him, you come visit us. We'll be glad to get you to go online. But Alexander Rivera, the collection numbers about 5,000 photos and about 20,000 negatives that we are currently working with digitizing. But here's what I'll tell you about some lessons learned. And this is about when we go out and we think about the question of building, and you'll find that, sometimes you go out looking for people, but sometimes you find you, and we're glad for that. But what we learned is that you have to be intentional and authentic when working with donors and others, right? And I'll tell you, I talk to folks sometimes, but they tell me what they won't tell the priest. And that's a relationship. And that's what it's about. If you don't understand anything else, as I tell everybody, the South is all about relationships. And if you don't understand that, you don't understand the South. Everybody got that? I'm sorry, did everybody got that? Okay, y'all. And then most of all, I learned never promise what you can't deliver on any agreement, right? So sometimes you say, well, something might not be a good fit for us, and they want to contact us. Sometimes I get pressure from the big house. I call the chancellor administration building. I call it the big house. When the big house calls, I got to answer that call. And they might say, well, what you think about it? I was like, well, you buy me some money, I'll think about it. But also remember to have that post-donation follow-up. That's the important part, right? Going back to them after they donate, because sometimes they may have other things they may want to give. But then also, I learned this, that sometimes people, when we talk about that question of intentionality, I remember one of my former professors, I won't say which one, who since deceased, she called me to the house and she said, oh yeah, well, I've always great material. She's a scholar on African missionaries going to Africa. Very unique field, one of only 10 in the entire United States of America. That was Dr. Sidney Davis, who was my mentor. And so the collection is there with us. Associated Black Women Historian papers are with us as a result of her. But one thing I remember her telling me, and she told me this way. She said, well, Mr. Vann, I want you to know, I'm giving you my papers, but I'm going to give you what I want you to see. And I had to understand it, right? But a few years later, I went back to that house and I got everything else. So, and then lastly, one donation gets enough, right? And so that's important for me to kind of understand as well. And I'll just know one thing on you, that one thing you find when you kind of looking and exploring neighborhoods and other communities, that you find that I don't care if you're in Durham, Robert, Chapel Hill, Carver, or anywhere else, that in each and every city and town there's a sort of history and culture. But we call it, in the historical field, an onion, right? And the thing about history is an onion. I know y'all are talking about onion early morning. But I'll tell you this, you go back and you start peeling back one layer, you'll find another layer, you'll find another, and that, my friends, is the richness of history. Understanding that prison that exists there. And these untold stories, and these are the things I'm concerned with today. These untold stories that most folks have never heard about, never thought about. That's what we're trying to get. That's what we're trying to do. So we do that by widening the footprint and doing more. And lastly, one other important point is around the question of historical memory and understanding the importance of memory. Memory is almost, in this world, it is a gift. I've been blessed to almost be able to remember almost 2,000 years back almost sometimes. But that memory is not oftentimes given to all. And so we also understand that sometimes we try to find a way to kind of merge this individual memory
into a collective memory, right? And that happens sometimes through the differences of opinions and ideas about how people see the same thing. And I do that a lot around community. You know, one part of the community, they've been kind of what we call the blue bloods, how they saw their community is one thing. But those who are working class, who live behind the big houses, even in the African community, they see their history in a very different way. And so we're trying to tackle that and find more richness in that. And so reminding you as well, for those of you like me, not just for the university, but for myself, I collect postcards, right, especially around African things. This is a great postcard, and what that says to you is that history travels, right? Did y'all pick on that? So not just a story sometimes you read on the back, right, that people write there, but these postcards go to other places, which means that history is traveling to places. Just like when people move to other places and migrate, those stories travel with them as well. And that almost next to last August, I'm seeing that look. Just think about non-traditional sources that we also collect. We had about 6,000 to 7,000 overall, with the goal to collect about 10,000 African funeral programs. This is a classic example. This is C.C. Spall, Charles Clinton Spall, who was chair of the board of trustees here at Central and here at Shaw University as well. And so we tell folks about the richness that you find in funeral programs. So if you don't collect funeral programs, I want you to start collecting funeral programs and save them for the next generation that they made the history of their people. And I've done my own kid book, and I told myself, well, this collection going to the university in London. I said, well, you better appreciate it while you got it, or you'll be going to enjoy that instead. But let's remember, African funeral program, history lives there, even in funeral program. Also, we've been working with the North Carolina Digital Heritage Center, getting a lot of our materials digitized. If you have not gone to the website, you were missing out on the trip. City directories, and that gives you a great amount of information. You should look at them. You should use them. You should use them as a source, free. That's open, right? And then also, African newspapers. We're thankful that not only through the North Carolina Heritage Center, Carolina Times, through the Richard B. Harrison Library, thank goodness, the Raleigh Carolinian, and for us, the NCCU Campus Echo student newspaper. These newspapers are digitized, available online, but offer a wealth of information used by folks all across the country. And so that's important, along with our yearbooks, by the way, that are digitized. And then one quick point I'll just note on here is that learning what we call leverage mechanics, right? And so those unaware, 2 years ago, we received, this is the third year of a Getty grant through Getty Images. As you know, Getty Images is the largest holding producer of photographs in the entire world, okay? Not the national world. And so they gave a call, asked us to apply, and we were one among 4 institutions that received the grant that gave us not only the equipment, but also paid interns, but also the expertise from not only Getty, but Epson, and these are companies that use great digital work. And so we're able to start digitizing these photographs, and these photographs are sold in the marketplace, right? You go online, and the money comes back to help the library. So these are some of the strategic things that we have to learn to do to bring in extra revenue to keep the library archives where it needs to be. And so we get $1,000 kind of come in like every quarter. Might not seem a lot, in the quarter, but it is growing. And so the more people know about our works, the more we get. I'll tell you this, the most noted photograph that is sold all the time with us is a great photograph that we have of a great Zoe McPherson. For those who aren't aware, she taught at the university about 2 quarters until Dr. Shepherd helped her find a new opportunity somewhere else. But that photograph is sold probably more than any other photograph that we have online. We have about 3,500 online. And then lastly, which tells you I'm almost close, the alphabets and terms, right? Now you all may have the alphabets, right? You may have some letters that I might need to add this, and you just pull it to the corner and say, hey, I left something out. But I try to do my best. A, archives, B, family Bibles, C, church records, D, determination. I'll say, yep, funeral home records. Go back to the funeral home, you never looking for somebody, call the funeral director, they will always know, and no one else knows, right? I added another piece, membership in groups that support this work. My great friend, Dr. Paula Harrell, is here, mentor and former professor at the university is here with the North Carolina. Tell us about you.
African American Historical and Genealogical Society.
Right. So membership. M is for membership. And I had you in mind today, but I added them in about that. That's important to understand. I spoke before that 2 3 weeks ago. And that was important to understand that working together with others is highly important. But also, stick-to-itiveness is important. And that's this idea of sort of rethinking, again, along the history lines of those things that we thought were important, but understanding that newer narratives, in order for newer narratives to be created, we have to think in much more different and very broader terms, right? As opposed to that one character, historical figure, you have to think in much more broader terms in terms of it. And so lately we've been doing a little bit more work around beauty salon. Most of y'all probably don't even think about it. You know the history that exists around beauty salon? More, my cousin back in Henderson, she ran a beauty salon 50 years, right? Or beauty parlor, as they call it back then. And one thing she was in charge of with the NAACP was membership, right? So what do you think while all the women were sitting there getting their hair done? What do you think she was doing? Selling them NAACP membership, right? She was always getting the awards at state conference, right? Because of memberships. And so no one understood the power of what happens in a beauty parlor salon. You know, we can't tell you what happens in the barbershop. I can't tell you. That's a whole. I can't buy it. But go back to funeral homes and also look at real estate and restaurants and many more single owner businesses and restaurants in the black community. These are questions of the day and of the hour of what research is looking for. But also, most important as we prepare to close is that we have to move away from that kind of singular narrative to a much more broader narrative that includes and brings in, and writes in the history, as I said, more women, marginalized community, and bring in also community history. That's important. And then also understand that the historical narrative represented very much what we call self-image and self-representation. And I know these are new terms for some of y'all, but it's important to understand that when we talk about all those great persons, great pioneers in 1897, who set out in a terrain that most folk would not have even thought of, who had the time and pleasure to think about writing and making sure that African history was recorded for historical and posterity sake. We owe it to them because they were again helping to widen this idea of self-image and self-representation and removing these negative stereotypical images that existed there. And then lastly, I say thank you. And then we will tell you, ever anything you need, you ever need, contact me. It's going to take a while now. You contact me, North University, whatever we can do to make it available. And I thank Dr. Emmett for the opportunity to come. Thank you so much. And I close with great words that I read out. And you know it again, for a few eagles that might be in the room. You got to do it. Thank you. All right, thank you. Good to see you. We know here, I read words we said, North Carolina University, no doubt, like you said here, that the eagle is no common for their barnyard. I thank you for the opportunity to share. I certainly hope I've said something that has enlightened your world and given you some reason to be in here today.